You know what they say about humans? They're fragile. Soft little pink things that break if you look at them wrong. At least that's what I thought before I met Corporal Jake Morrison in advanced combat training. My name is Vorth-Kalis, and I'm what you might call a walking mountain of muscle and bad decisions. Standing 8 feet tall with natural armor plating that could stop a plasma rifle, I was the pride of the Corvan Military Academy. My species has been conquering worlds since before humans figured out fire, so when Earth joined the Galactic Defense Coalition, we all had a good laugh. Look at them, my bunkmate Grex would wheeze through his mandibles. They don't even have proper claws. How do they expect to fight anything? The humans had been at the academy for 3 months, and honestly, they were a joke. Tiny, weak, and worst of all, they had this annoying habit of never giving up. Even when clearly outmatched, they'd keep coming back for more punishment. It was pathetic, really. That particular morning started like any other in Professor Kelm's hand-to-hand combat class. The old Thrakari had been drilling us on pressure point manipulation, which sounds fancy but basically means how to make your enemy hurt really, really bad without killing them immediately. Today, Kelm announced, his 4 eyes scanning the class, we practice restraint techniques. Partner up. Larger species with smaller ones. Great. That meant I got stuck with one of the humans. Morrison stepped forward. Average height for his species, maybe 5'10", with sandy hair and these weird blue eyes that seemed to take in everything. He had this crooked smile that I already found irritating. "Guess we're dance partners," he said, extending his hand. I stared at the offered appendage. Was he serious? A greeting ritual before I demonstrated why his species should stick to diplomatic missions. "Let's just get this over with," I rumbled, ignoring the hand. Kelm explained the exercise. Simple enough, the larger partner would apply a wrist lock, and the smaller partner would attempt to escape using proper technique. No powers, no weapons, just skill and leverage. "Ready, big guy?" Morrison asked, still wearing that insufferable grin. I grabbed his wrist. Humans have such delicate bones, like twigs covered in meat. The proper technique required gradual pressure, but honestly, I was getting tired of these creatures' cocky attitude. Maybe a little extra squeeze would teach him some respect. Morrison's face went pale as I increased the pressure. I could feel the bones in his hand starting to give way. The logical thing would have been to tap out, to submit before permanent damage occurred. Instead, he looked me dead in the eye and said, "That all you got, Rocky?" The crack was audible across the training mat. His hand bent at an angle that even human anatomy shouldn't allow. Several students gasped. Morrison's face went white, then green, but he didn't scream. He just stood there, cradling his obviously broken hand, still wearing that damned smile. "Vorth-Kalis." Kelm's voice cut through the sudden silence. "Medical bay now, both of you." The walk to the medical bay was awkward. Morrison kept up a steady stream of chatter, despite obviously being in agony. "You know," he said conversationally, "back home I had a buddy who could crack walnuts with his bare hands. Course that was nothing compared to what you just did." That was some serious grip strength there. Was he complimenting me? After I'd just shattered his hand? "Why aren't you angry?" I found myself asking. He shrugged with his good shoulder. "Stuff happens. Besides, Doc will have me fixed up in no time." These medical bays are amazing, right? Back on Earth, a break like this would mean weeks in a cast. Dr. Yenna, the Academy's chief medical officer, took one look at Morrison's hand and started muttering in her native language. I caught a few words, most of which roughly translated to stupid and why do I bother. "Compound fracture of the 3rd and 4th metacarpals," she announced. 10 minutes in the bone regenerator should handle it. "You," she pointed at me, "wait outside." I found myself pacing in the corridor. This was ridiculous. Why should I care about one fragile human's injury? It was his fault for not submitting when he should have. But that smile, even with tears streaming down his face from the pain, he'd kept smiling. 20 minutes later, Morrison emerged with his hand wrapped in a biosynthetic cast. "Good as new," he announced, flexing his fingers. "Well, we'll be in about 6 hours. Thanks for the experience, Vorth. Mind if I call you Vorth? Vorth-Kalis is a mouthful. You're thanking me. I broke your hand. Yeah, and now I know what a Korvan grip feels like. Could be useful information someday." This human was clearly insane. Over the next few days, something strange happened. Morrison started showing up everywhere I was. Not following me exactly, but somehow we kept ending up in the same places. The mess hall, the training grounds, the library. "Fancy meeting you here," he'd say each time, as if we'd bumped into each other by cosmic coincidence rather than his obvious stalking. "What do you want?" I finally asked on the third day, cornering him near the combat simulators. "Want? Nothing specific. Just figured we should get to know each other better. After all, we're practically blood brothers now." "Blood brothers?" Figure of speech. "You broke my hand, I didn't cry about it. That's got to count for something in warrior culture, right?" I stared at him. "You think breaking your hand made us friends?" "Well, not friends exactly. More like I respect your strength, you respect my resilience. It's a foundation." "A foundation for what?" His grin widened. "Oh, you'll see." That evening I was in the communal showers when Morrison appeared. Most species at the Academy showered separately, partly due to different atmospheric requirements and partly because nobody wanted to see a naked Thrakari. But humans, being humans, seemed to have no shame about anything. "Hey, Vorth," Morrison called out, seemingly oblivious to the fact that a naked, wet Korvan could probably snap him in half with minimal effort. "Great workout today, right?" "Morrison," I growled. "What are you doing here?" "Showering." "Same as you." "These sonic cleaners are incredible, aren't they? So much better than water." He started washing himself with casual efficiency, humming some sort of human tune. Other species in the shower area were giving us both wide berths. "You're making everyone nervous," I observed. "Am I? Probably just not used to humans being so comfortable around other species. We're pretty adaptable that way. Or you have no survival instincts." "Oh, I have plenty of those. For instance, right now, every instinct I have is telling me that you could kill me without breaking a sweat. But here's the thing about humans, Vorth. We're really, really good at ignoring our instincts when we need to. That sounds like a design flaw. Maybe. Or maybe it's our greatest strength. Hard to say, really." He finished washing and grabbed his towel. "See you tomorrow for weapons training." Weapons training. Right, I'd almost forgotten about that particular nightmare. The next morning, Professor Zarthan had us working with plasma blades, elegant weapons requiring precision and control. Naturally, the humans struggled with them initially. Too much power in untrained hands could result in severed limbs or worse. Morrison, still wearing his biocast, was having particular difficulty. The injury clearly affected his grip strength and dexterity. "Perhaps you should sit this one out," Zarthan suggested after Morrison's third dropped blade in 5 minutes. "No way," Morrison replied. "I need to learn to adapt. Injuries happen in real combat, right? Better to train through them." Zarthan's tentacles writhed with what I'd learned was frustration. "Very well. Partner exercises. Same pairs as yesterday." "Oh, wonderful. Me and the one-handed human with the death wish." "Try not to break anything else," Morrison said cheerfully as we faced off. The exercise was simple blade work. Attack, defend, counter-attack. Basic patterns that should have been safe even for beginners. Should have been. Morrison's injured hand betrayed him during the third sequence. His blade wavered, leaving his entire left side exposed. Training or no training, my instincts kicked in. The plasma blade swept toward his ribs in a perfect arc. And somehow, impossibly, Morrison moved. Not away from the blade, toward it. His injured hand shot out, grabbing my wrist with a grip that shouldn't have been possible given his recent injury. His body twisted, using my own momentum against me, and suddenly I was off balance. The next thing I knew, I was on my back with Morrison kneeling beside me, my own plasma blade pressed gently against my throat. "Yield," he asked politely. The training mat had gone dead silent. A human had just disarmed a Corvan warrior in single combat. That wasn't supposed to be possible. "How?" I managed to croak. Morrison helped me to my feet, smiling that damned smile again. Leverage, physics, and a little bit of what we like to call controlled desperation. Professor Zarthan approached, his 4 eyes wide with something that might have been respect. "Cadet Morrison," he said slowly, "that was unexpected." "Thank you, sir. Though I should mention I couldn't have done it if Vorth hadn't taught me so much about pain tolerance yesterday." All eyes turned to me. What? The hand-breaking thing really opened my eyes to what I could push through when I needed to. Sometimes the best teacher is experience, you know. I stared at him. "You planned this?" "Planned what? Getting my hand broken?" "That would be crazy." But his eyes were twinkling with something that looked suspiciously like mischief. That evening I found Morrison in the Academy's recreation center, playing some sort of human game that involved throwing small projectiles at a circular target. "Darts," he explained when he saw me watching. "Want to try?" "Why did you do it?" I asked instead. "Do what?" "Yesterday. In the shower, you said humans ignore their survival instincts. Were you trying to prove something?" Morrison collected his projectiles from the target before answering. "Maybe. Or maybe I was just trying to understand something." "Understand what?" "Why a species that's supposedly been conquering worlds for millennia would need to prove their superiority by breaking a cadet's hand in a training exercise." The words hit harder than I expected. "I didn't mean to." "Sure you did. You wanted to put the uppity human in his place. Show me what real strength looked like." I had no response to that because it was true. "But here's what's interesting," Morrison continued. "You felt bad about it afterward. I could see it in your body language during the walk to the medical bay. That tells me something important about you." "What?" "Is that under all that armor and attitude, you're not actually a bully. You're just scared." "Scared? Of what?" Morrison lined up another throw, "Of being ordinary. Your whole species' identity is built on being the strongest, the toughest, the most warrior-like. But deep down you know that raw strength isn't everything, and that terrifies you." The dart hit the bullseye with a satisfying thunk. "So you decided to teach me a lesson," I said slowly. "Not teach. Show. There's a difference." "Show me what?" Morrison grinned. "That humans might be physically weaker than you, but we've got a few tricks you haven't seen yet. And more importantly, that strength without wisdom is just violence. And what if I'd learned the wrong lesson? What if I'd decided humans were too dangerous and needed to be eliminated? Then I'd have been wrong about you. But I wasn't, was I?" I thought about that for a long moment. "It's the medical bay. You knew I'd wait for you. Had a pretty good feeling, yeah. And the shower incident. Wanted to see if you'd actually hurt someone who was completely defenseless. You didn't." "The weapons training?" "That one was just showing off," Morrison admitted with a laugh. "Though the setup was perfect, me injured, apparently vulnerable, you with every advantage. And yet you still won. We both won, Vorth. I learned that Corvans aren't just mindless brutes, and you learned that humans aren't helpless prey." I sat down heavily in one of the recreation center's chairs, which groaned under my weight. "My people aren't going to understand this," I said. "Understanding isn't required for respect," Morrison replied. "Just recognition that there's more than one way to be strong." "Is that what humans do? Turn their weaknesses into strengths?" Morrison considered this. "Not exactly. We just refuse to accept that something being difficult means it's impossible. Your people see a problem and smash it. We see a problem and find 17 different ways around it, including deliberately getting your hand broken." "That wasn't part of the plan," Morrison protested. "That was just opportunistic adaptation. You're insane. Maybe. But I'm insane in a very practical way. Over the following weeks, Morrison and I developed what I can only describe as the strangest partnership in Academy history. He'd challenge my assumptions about strength and warfare, and I'd teach him techniques that his smaller frame could actually utilize. The thing about leverage, he explained one day while demonstrating a throw that used an opponent's weight against them, is that it doesn't care how strong you are. Physics is physics. And the thing about armor, I countered, showing him how to strike between plates, is that it's only as strong as its weakest point. Our classmates thought we'd both lost our minds, a human and a Corvan, sparring as equals. It went against everything they understood about interspecies relations. But it worked. Morrison's combat scores improved dramatically and mine, well, let's just say that learning to fight smarter instead of harder was a revelation. The real test came during our first major field exercise, a simulated planetary assault with mixed species teams. Naturally, Morrison and I were assigned to the same squad. Just our luck, he said as we reviewed the mission briefing. A fortified position, multiple defensive layers, and we're supposed to take it with minimal casualties. Standard assault doctrine would be a frontal attack with overwhelming force, I noted, which would work, but at a cost. How many of our squad mates are you willing to sacrifice for a training exercise? It was a fair question. The answer, I realized, was none. So what do you suggest? Morrison's grin was positively predatory. How do you feel about a little creative problem solving? The field exercise was supposed to be straightforward. Our squad of 12 mixed-species cadets had to infiltrate and capture a mock fortress defended by automated systems and instructor-controlled opposition forces. Standard military doctrine suggested a direct assault, which would probably succeed but cost us half the team. Morrison had other ideas. Look at this, he said, spreading the tactical map on the ground. Everyone sees the main entrance, the secondary gate, maybe the ventilation shafts. But what about this? His finger traced a line along what appeared to be solid rock face. That's a cliff, pointed out Sarah Valk, our Andromedan squad leader. Her crystalline features reflected skepticism in prismatic patterns. Exactly. A 200-foot vertical cliff that no sane person would attempt to scale. Which means... No defenses, I finished, beginning to understand his twisted logic. Then bingo. While they're expecting us to come through the obvious routes, we take the impossible one. Our Zentari squad mate, Creeks, chittered nervously. Humans might be able to climb such surfaces, but the rest of us lack the proper adaptations. Morrison's smile widened. That's where our armored mountain comes in. He clapped me on the back, which was like a gnat patting a boulder. Vorth here is going to carry us. I'm sorry, what now? Simple physics again. You've got the strength to carry 3 of us at a time. I've got the climbing ability to scout the route and set anchor points. Everyone else provides covering fire and diversionary attacks. Sarah's features shifted to confused patterns. This plan is completely insane. Thank you, Morrison said cheerfully. I take that as a compliment. 2 hours later, I found myself pressed against a sheer rock face with Morrison strapped to my back and Creeks clinging to my arm like a terrified parasite. Below us, the rest of our squad was making enough noise to wake the dead, drawing all defensive attention to the main gates. Left hand up about 2 feet, Morrison whispered in my ear. There's a good grip there. How can you possibly see in this darkness? Human eyes adapt better than you think. Plus, I've been studying this cliff face for the past hour with enhancement scopes. Of course he had. The climb took 43 minutes. 43 minutes of hauling myself and 2 squad mates up a vertical surface that should have been impossible to scale. My armor plating scraped against stone, sending small rock slides cascading into the darkness below. Almost there, Morrison breathed. 10 more feet and we're over the top. That's when the spotlight hit us. Well, Morrison said conversationally as alarms began wailing throughout the fortress, this is awkward. Plasma bolts started striking the cliff face around us. Apparently, the defenders weren't as distracted as we'd hoped. Any brilliant ideas now, human? I growled, trying to find handholds while energy weapons turned the stone around us into molten slag. As a matter of fact, yes, how's your throwing arm? Before I could ask what he meant, Morrison had unstrapped himself from my back and was balancing on my shoulders with impossible grace. "Tricks," he called to our Zentari squadmate. "Remember that trajectory calculation exercise from last week? The one where you launched yourself from a catapult. That was supposed to be theoretical. Everything's theoretical until you try it. Calculate my arc to that defensive platform." "Morrison, no," I said, realizing what he was planning. "Morrison, yes," he replied with manic enthusiasm. Crix's mandibles clicked rapidly. "Accounting for gravity, wind resistance, and your body mass, you need a launch velocity of approximately 47 feet per second at a 32-degree angle." "Perfect. Vorth, when I say throw, launch me at that gun emplacement." "This is suicide." "This is Tuesday. Big difference." A plasma bolt scorched the stone inches from my face. We were running out of time and options. "Throw." I threw. Morrison sailed through the air like a demented missile, spinning to absorb impact as he crashed into the defensive platform. Sparks flew as automated guns swiveled to track this unexpected aerial assault. Then silence. "Morrison," I called. "I'm good," came his voice from the fortress. "Also, I may have accidentally destroyed their entire defensive grid while landing." "My bad." The spotlights went dark. The alarms ceased. In the sudden quiet, I could hear Morrison humming that same tune from the showers. "Coast is clear," he announced. "Come on up." The doors unlocked. Getting Creeks and myself over the wall without Morrison scouting proved challenging, but manageable. I found him sitting on a pile of what used to be sophisticated defensive electronics, nursing a bruised shoulder and looking extremely pleased with himself. "How?" was all I managed. Gravity, momentum, and a really, really lucky landing. Plus, these automated systems aren't designed to handle targets coming from impossible angles. Sometimes the best defense against advanced technology is doing something so stupid that nobody planned for it. Our remaining squad mates reached us 20 minutes later, having walked through the now undefended main entrance. Sarah's crystalline features were cycling through what I'd learned were expressions of extreme confusion. "The entire defensive network just shut down," she reported. "How did you manage that?" Morrison gestured vaguely at the sparking wreckage, physics, and a little bit of that controlled desperation I mentioned earlier. "You destroyed a 1,000,000-credit training facility by throwing yourself at it." "I prefer to think of it as aggressive problem-solving." The debriefing was interesting. Professor Zarthan stared at the mission recordings for a full 10 minutes before speaking. "In 30 years of military instruction," he said slowly, "I have never seen anything quite like this. Cadet Morrison, your solution was completely outside established tactical doctrine." "Yes, sir." "It should not have worked." "No, sir." "And yet." "Yes, sir." "Sir." The fortress was taken with 0 casualties, minimal resource expenditure, and in record time. Morrison's grin could have powered a small starship. "Sometimes the best way through a problem is around it, sir." And Cadet Vorth-Kalis, Zarthan's attention turned to me. "Your role in this unconventional assault?" "I carried people up a cliff and threw my squadmate at a building, sir." "Indeed. And how do you feel about these tactics?" I considered the question carefully. "They worked, sir. Results speak louder than doctrine." Zarthan's tentacles writhed in what I now recognized as approval. "Precisely. Warfare is not about following rules, cadets. It's about adapting to circumstances and finding victory where others see only obstacles." After dismissal, Morrison and I found ourselves back in the recreation center. He was teaching me the dart game while I tried to process everything that had happened. "You could have died," I said, watching him line up another throw. And that stunt with the cliff and the fortress, one miscalculation and you'd be splattered across 50 feet of stone wall. But I wasn't, Morrison replied, releasing the dart. Perfect bullseye again. That's the thing about calculated risks, Vorth. You calculate them. There's no calculation that accounts for pure luck. Sure there is. You just call it margin for error and plan accordingly. I shook my head. Your species is certifiably insane. Maybe. But we're also really, really hard to predict. And in warfare, unpredictability is often more valuable than strength. Is that what this has all been about? Teaching me that humans are unpredictable. Morrison collected his darts thoughtfully. Not just unpredictable, adaptable, creative, resilient. We don't win fights by being stronger than our opponents. We win by being more flexible. And my people? Your people are impressive warriors. Strong, disciplined, honorable. But you think in straight lines. Problem appears, apply force until problem disappears. That usually works. Against conventional problems, sure. But what happens when you face something that can't be solved with force? What happens when raw strength isn't enough? I thought about our recent exercises, about Morrison's unconventional solutions and impossible victories. You adapt, I said slowly. Now you're getting it. We spent the next hour throwing darts and talking about tactical flexibility. Morrison demonstrated how seemingly weak positions could be turned into advantages with proper leverage and timing. I shared Corvan battle techniques that relied on overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. You know what's funny? Morrison said as we prepared to leave. Your people and mine aren't really that different. How do you figure? We both refuse to give up. The difference is in our methods. You smash through obstacles, we flow around them. But the core determination, that's the same. The next few weeks transformed our training dynamic. Other cadets began seeking us out, curious about these mixed species tactics that seemed to work despite violating every principle they'd been taught. Lieutenant Sarah Kovac, a human engineering specialist, partnered with Grex to develop new approaches to siege warfare. Sarah Valk started working with our Thrakari squadmates on reconnaissance techniques that combined Andromedan light manipulation abilities with Thrakari stealth instincts. Even the instructors began incorporating our methods into their curriculum. You've started something, I observed one evening as we watched a mixed group practicing the cliff climbing techniques Morrison had developed. We started something, he corrected. This only works because you were willing to look past your preconceptions about human fragility. And you were willing to look past Corvan brutality. Exactly. Turns out, most stereotypes crumble when you actually get to know people. Speaking of getting to know people, I said carefully, I owe you an apology. For what? For breaking your hand, for thinking humans were weak. For being exactly the kind of prejudiced bully you called me out for being. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. You know what the funny thing is? Breaking my hand was probably the best thing that could have happened. How do you figure? It showed me what Corvan's strength really looks like. But more importantly, it showed me that you cared about using that strength responsibly. The guilt you felt afterward, that told me everything I needed to know about your character. So you're saying I should break more hands? Morrison laughed. Let's maybe stick to less destructive teaching methods from now on. Our graduation ceremony took place 3 months later. Mixed species teams had become standard practice throughout the academy, and our tactical innovations were being implemented across the Galactic Defense Coalition. Professor Kelm, who had witnessed that first disastrous handshake, spoke at the ceremony. This year's class, he said, has taught us all a valuable lesson. Strength comes in many forms. Sometimes it's the power to break through any barrier. Sometimes it's the wisdom to find a different path entirely. But true strength is knowing when to use which approach. After the ceremony, Morrison and I found ourselves assigned to the same deep space reconnaissance unit. Apparently, Command had noticed our unusual partnership. Ready for the real thing? Morrison asked as we reviewed our first mission briefing. With you as my partner, I'm ready for anything. Even more cliff climbing. Even more cliff climbing. Morrison grinned that familiar, maddening grin. Outstanding. Because according to this mission profile, we're going to be doing a lot of that. I looked at the briefing. Our target was a supposedly impregnable fortress on a planet with 3 times standard gravity and atmosphere that would melt most species' lungs. Impossible terrain, hostile environment, overwhelming defensive advantages, I mused. Let me guess. You already have a plan? As a matter of fact, I do. How do you feel about being launched from a catapult? I stared at him. You want to shoot me out of a catapult? Not just you, both of us, together. Really, really fast. That's your plan? Get shot out of a catapult together? Well, that's part 1. Part 2 involves some creative use of your armor plating as a shield, my climbing skills as navigation, and a lot of that controlled desperation we've gotten so good at. And part 3? Part 3 is where we improvise based on whatever insane situation we find ourselves in after parts 1 and 2. I considered this. 6 months ago, the idea of trusting my life to a fragile human's improvised plans would have been unthinkable. Now? When do we start building this catapult? Morrison's smile could have lit up a space station. Now you're thinking like a human. No, I corrected, hefting our equipment pack. I'm thinking like a team. And that, as it turned out, made all the difference.